into seedlings and what I do, when I do it, why I do it, and hopefully I get it right. This is a request from Megan K. Thank you very much. You got me thinking in order to get these answers straight and do your request justice as to why I do what I do, because sometimes it's just intuition. So no, you got me thinking, and I appreciate that. And let's see if my logic holds true. This is going to be interesting. So I pulled out some of my seedlings and comparison plants to give an idea where my thought process goes with regards to caring for seedlings, for one, when to repot them, if to repot them, and why I don't. So let's have a look and dive in and see if I can do your request justice. Right, first of all, when I get a seedling in, I should already know what size is the plant going to be when it's mature. So that is one of the conditions I base what pot am I going to put it in as a seedling, because I do want to minimize disturbance as best as possible. So that's my first thought. How big is the plant going to be? Determines the pot size. The second thing is, when I see a seedling when it comes in, I determine the size of the plant, how long it can stay in the pot I'm going to put it in, because I want to disturb it as little as possible. I want it to get established, and then that becomes the second factor. If the seedling is smaller than the pot I had intended for it, then I have to rethink, and vice versa. Third, I look at the roots and what do I need to do to control how wet the base of the seedling is going to get, while I still try to provide it with enough humidity in order for any roots that are coming not to desiccate and go down into the media. So if the roots are thin, I normally opt for a bigger media, more airy, as opposed to if the roots are thicker, like here with the leopoldii cross, where I can see the roots going into the media and drinking a lot more moisture. I know that seems counterproductive, but again, it depends on the size of the seedling and what its needs are. I do not use a humidifier, so that is another thing I have to think of. Humidity has to come from the environment, or I have to provide it. If you have a humidifier, that changes it a little bit. It makes your life a lot easier. I do not have one. I have stopped using heat mats for cost reasons. I used to overwinter everything that came in and was a seedling or young plant on heat mats, and the cost was just, no, I couldn't do it anymore. So this is now my first winter overwintering these guys that I consider delicate without a heat mat. Okay, so let's have a look. I'm going to start with this one here, which is my velutina, which you did not see in my little Bebes introduction. So this velutina came to me and I thought I was going to get a bigger plant, but this is the seedling, which would be the same ratio wise as the leopoldii here on the left is, but the velutina is going to get much bigger. So I saw that I had functioning roots when I got it in the pot. It was in bark like usual, and I saw these roots and I thought I can work with that, and now I have a growing tip right there. I can work with it in this pot, which is a 15 centimeter, and it has a reservoir on the bottom, because I can see them, I can see how they react. I haven't buried the base, and I don't want to move this plant for any considerable amount of time. So establishing it in its media where it's going to live for the next 2 or 3 days is another thought, is another thought process. The less you can fiddle with seedlings, the better. The reason I'm saying that is because back here I have the tenebrosa aurea. It's already been with me for 2 years. It is considered in my eyes a juvenile, but I put it in this pot because I didn't want to move it, also for a considerable amount of time. Especially when they're not established and they're a little bit older, they can actually dump all their roots much quicker than a seedling would if you keep the base nice and moist. If I were to let these roots dry out completely all the time, I would lose these roots because of the way it was started in its little pot. So I try to put it in a pot. I don't have to move it or repot it for a considerable amount of time. And then I try to manipulate the humidity around the roots of the seedling while it's getting established. So basically, this plant, the velutina, is projected to be this big as an adult. If I can leave it in this pot for 2 or 3 years, maybe even 4, then I've achieved what I've been thinking of doing. Leave it alone, establish, let it grow and mature. Here, you saw this in my Bebes video, the harpophylla. Here I have nothing to work with. I don't even have to pull the plant out to see I have no roots. The plant itself tells me a story, so I'm leaving it alone. This is for me a time not to repot. It's too much, it'll die. It won't make it, not even with humidity. So I've left it exactly how the nursery sent it to me, and I've just put it into the pot I have designated for it when it's ready to go. If and when I see some movement here and some roots, that's when I will take action and move it into the setup that I have for Rapiculus Laelias, which is lava, ceramis and sand. So why this one? Well, consider the age. This one is now 2.5 years old, and as per my other video, it did absolutely nothing. This is how it was, apart from losing a few leaves in the back, maybe 1 or 2. This one, like I said, is going to go. It's done nothing. So based on that, and the fact I had one little icky looking root right there, you can see the remnants of it right there. Now that is still functioning, but that's the only control I had to mist it every morning. And then finally it put out this root, and you can see how it's accumulated salt. And that is from the ceramis and whatever residue was in the water in the early days, because it wasn't strong enough to absorb any nutrients. So if there's residue in the ceramis, no matter how you clean it, those minerals will build up around the root. So there's that, but it didn't kill it, thank goodness, because I kept misting it as it grew. And I started to also manipulate its direction of growth to go down, because it was quite happily going off in the opposite direction. So because the plant was so small, I put it in a smaller container, because this way, if I keep pouring water through it, I have control of it. And the bigger container was a waste of space. There was no point. I had no roots. I needed a little smaller medium to hydrate or keep the humidity up around the little one, whereas here it's up to me to keep up the humidity, because I don't want to move these plants. When this one gets big enough, and I'm saying 1 or 2 more growths, I will move it, ceramis and all, into here. And for me, that is the beauty of inert media. I have no root interference or disturbance, and I can move it no matter whether I have a new growth starting, new roots starting, or anything like that. I don't have to take that into consideration. So I do not say that, bark is not good or sphagnum moss is not good, but sphagnum moss for me is far too expensive, and I always have to import it, and I would rather spend money on a good fertilizer than on sphagnum moss. So I bought ceramis in the early days, and I've been recycling. So my intention here, and why I am okay to repot whenever I feel like it, once I see it performing in here, it's because I can just take it out and leave the ceramis wherever it sticks to and put it into its next pot, which would be a size like this one, and then just fill around with leca, because this one will not need ceramis when it matures. So with the finer rooted ones, I don't know if these are seedlings or not. I've got two leonis because there's two different types. The Madagascar type is a smaller version of what is in the Comore Islands, which is the larger version. If I'm not mistaken, I have the Comores and the Madagascar type. So I don't know whether this is a seedling or a Madagascar type. We'll find out. Nurseries are normally not that specific, but judging by what I see here, it's possible that this is the Comores one. But anyway, back to the root circumstances. You can see how fine the roots are here. And I've put them in lava rock. A, because Angraecums hate their roots disturbed. That is the theory. Honestly, with my Crestwood Tomorrow Star, I have not actually experienced that. But I'm not going to risk it. You know, I'd rather err on the side of caution than to be like, oh, I know better. And then, you know, wait and see and find out. But I put it into this coarser, larger media, lava rock, with ceramis you can see interspersed for wicking. The orchid tops are perfect for that, because this one's roots from the pot, whether they're still alive or not, I don't know, go all the way down, and then it becomes a self-watering setup because you don't put media in between. You leave the roots in the pot at the lower level, then fill up with media, and then you fill in the tray, and it becomes a self-watering setup. Plus it's very airy. So because the roots are fine, I have better control how I mist them, moist them, and keep the plant humidified. I put it into larger media. And here you can see with the tiny little Oncidium roots there from this Baldin. This is vericosum Baldin. And the story of this plant is also quite bizarre, interesting. Or I got these little bulbs in the back. I think these three, I think 2 and 2, yeah. And one of the biggest bulb actually has a huge munched snail hole in it. eBay seller, charming, never bought from him again. Because I couldn't see the snail, the hole was so deep, but when I hydrogen peroxided it, I could see that something large had dissolved and it was oozing out. It was so gross. But needless to say, I put it straight away. It's been in this setup for 2.5 years. Nothing to work with, but being able to control the top layer with my daily mistings or as needed to keep it moist and humid, it grew the 2 new growths there the previous year. This is last year. And now I've got 1 and 2 more growing on this year. They're just starting. So the large media allows me to have better control. And the inert media makes it perfect for repotting at any time. Because again, it doesn't need to be taken off the roots. It can be done, you know, let's be reasonable. If it's dead in winter, it's snowing outside, you're not using heat mats, and don't have a humidifier, etc., etc. You know, those are all components where it's like, you know, you can wait a few months and then the conditions will help you in the progress of your seedling. But I would always recommend inert media. In the beginning it might be a little bit more work because you have to keep the flow of humidity going and also pushing through the water, and you know, no nutrients, but just, you know, giving the pot a good flush to bring and draw in the oxygen through the root system. So that's what I do with seedlings. I keep them in the winter. I have them on a shelf where there's always airflow by the terrace door. Even if it's not that warm outside, I can crack that part of the door open They will always have airflow because I do mist in the winter as well, and I want them to dry out, of course. But so they're in like bright shade. There's no direct sun on these whatsoever. The leonis in the morning get sun now because of the angle of the sun, and that's fine. They love it. These little guys, because I don't want to fry them, they are in bright shade as well. And all the other ones that you saw in my previous video of the juveniles, they are in bright shade as well. I don't give them direct sun. That's just asking too much. That stresses them out too much. The dehydration of the leaves would go through the roof, and you don't want that. So yeah, not entirely sure I answered all your questions. I hope I did. But again, we have the beauty of the comment section below, and use it, abuse it, and fire away. Sometimes these kinds of videos then add more questions, and I'm open to them, so feel free, okay? Thank you, Megan, again for asking, and I hope this was of some help. So I'll see you next time. Bye!